Hello and welcome to Her Theology. My name is Cass and I'm so glad you're with me today. Now, before I get stuck into the episode, as always, I will do a slight warning that we are talking about a three-letter word that has to do with, pertains to married couples. And so if you have little children around, maybe this episode is not for you, hit pause and listen to it another time. Now, this marks our fourth episode in this 5-part series where we are talking about sex as Christians. What are we at? What are some of the hurdles and challenges that we can face as women, and also as men, uh, in our Christian faith, in our married lives, and how do we overcome that? And so I want to do this series. Yeah, no, it's not a theological series, but I want to do this series because I feel like the church doesn't talk about it enough. And I wanted to create this space, this conversation to hear from experts on how you, me, us everyday people can overcome challenges that arise in our marriage and the realities of just doing life. You get married and, in the first few episodes we heard from Renee Yam, the science behind falling in love and this honeymoon phase. And then that kind of dwindles down and this deeper attachment and connection forms. And then, and then we get married and that comes at different times, but then life just happens. You're busy and perhaps you have children. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have a really full on career, but life happens and our body then changes. And so I have an episode kind of addressing each of those kind of life stages and what we can do to work together and to really continue to fight hard for strong marriages within the church. Because this is the reason, part of the reason why I'm doing this series is that I believe that if the church has strong marriages, it's going to shine the bright light of hope that it is to the rest of the world. And there's different ways we do that, but having strong marriages, we should be fighting for that. And we should be having open discussions so that when marriages are strong and really well connected together. And we need to fight for that in a world that's so over-sexualized and has so many mixed messages, completely opposed to what the Bible says at times in regards to sex. So that's why I'm doing this series. Now, this episode, I talked to Dr. Monica Cook. She is amazing, as always. I feel like all the women have been. She is a qualified sexologist and educator holding a Master's of Sexual and Reproductive Health through the University of Sydney. She has a qualification in both science communication and science research. So she's one smart cookie. And what I love, and you'll hear about this, is that she's really evidence-based in her approach, but she loves how science, again, affirms what Scripture says and how God has outlined sex for his people. And so she has years of experience. She's sat down with people, she's worked through it, but she's also done all the research and the evidence and the science behind it. So it's a really cool discussion. And this particular episode, we focus on the stage of life when your kids are a bit older, or whether just in general you're a bit older, you may not have children. But what does it look like to maintain a deep connection and intimacy with our spouse when, perimenopause and then menopause hit in. Maybe the kids have moved out of the home. Maybe we're starting to think of retirement. Life's changing a bit. Hobbies have changed. Interests have changed. So what does it look like to address all these things that are happening? And there's a lot going on for us women. Like, let me tell you, this is a very informative episode because I learned so much about perimenopause, menopause, hormones, insane changes that we all need to be aware of. And so Monica brings all of that to us, and she does it in a way that's really fun. We have a good laugh. It's a really fun episode. So even if you're not married, if you're single, I would say that this episode is still really appropriate and good for you to listen to, because we don't really talk much about children. It's more about what are the changes our body is going to go through over the years. And so especially as we kind of hit our late 30s, going into the 40s, 50s, we talk about all that sort of stuff. And Monica's really passionate. I mean, she provides really honest, clear information to help you understand all of this well. And so you can find Monica at her website, so reconceived.com.au. That's her personal website where you'll find information about Monica. You could book her to come speak at your church. You could find out she's got a lot of resources on there, and you can also book in to see her and have sessions with her. So that's Reconceived, RECONCEIVED. CEIVED.com.au. But she's also started work part-time with a new clinic in Sydney called Life to the Full. And you can find that at lifetothefull.com.au. And that's an organization that has a bunch of psychologists, clinicians there to help people work through mental health, including one aspect, which is this sex stuff. So Monica's there as their sexologist. So you can find her there. Make sure you check it out. But anyway, if you're new to Her Theology, welcome. Thank you. Leave a review. Follow along, whatever platform you're listening to this. If you are on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. That really helps grow Her Theology organically. And also, if you are not already, follow along on Instagram, Her Theology, or Facebook, and you'll be able to be updated with just random things that my brain thinks of throughout the week. And also, if you want to find out more about Her Theology, like what is it that I'm trying to do here? What's the vision, the mission? Check out hertheology.com. You can also support the show now. If you go to hertheology.com and find the support page, you can actually donate to help just cover the costs of this podcast. It costs a fair bit each year to just run this. So I would love your support. If you have been listening for a little while and that's something you could feel like you could do, then I would greatly appreciate that. I will be starting Patreon soon, but I'm just creating some more content for that to make that actually a good initiative and also to incentivize it for you, I guess, and to make sure you're getting lots of value. But more on that later on. Other than that, enjoy this episode, share it with your friends and family. That's a really good way to help and get this conversation going within the church, right? Like we all need to be talking about this stuff. We're all going to be facing perimenopause or menopause, maybe not the dudes, but all us women will be facing that at one point. So come along on the ride as you learn, like I did, about all the things that are to come. Fun. Do not fear, my friends. There is so much out there to help us, and it's good that we are informed. All right, enjoy the episode. Mm-hmm. Well, Monica, thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm loving that I get to meet more and more Australian Christian Aussie women. Like, it's just awesome. So, Monica, maybe you can start. I want to know, like, what brought you in or what made you interested in this particular topic? Like, why did you want to dedicate your life's work to sex? And I mean, I guess it's not just sex, but yeah. Let's, for the sake of the episode, let's go there.
No, great question. I always say, I don't know if I necessarily set my mind to it. I think God sort of more opened up doors and I just took the next step in. But I do know that I've always passionately loved science and its capacity to sort of transform lives if applied correctly, in the sense of, oh my goodness, this is a deep understanding for how the world works. How can I use or communicate science in such a way that I can transform and help people and support people in their lives? And so that has been a really interesting journey, just following my love of that. So it saw me into research, science research for a little while. And then I actually ran off with the science circus and I traveled around Australia doing science shows for Indigenous communities and rural and remote parts.
Oh, you actually meant the science circus. Yeah. I thought you meant as in like...
Yeah, no, I was, blowing rockets up and doing liquid nitrogen shows. And
that is so fun.
Yeah, just getting a real love of learning out there in the kind of remote parts of Australia, in prisons, in hospitals. So that was so cool. And then it moved me into health education at the Children's Hospital. And so I was in that for a little bit. And I think it was really there that I discovered that there were these two areas in the realm of health that we just did science communication so poorly in. And it was the realm of fertility and the realm of sex. There was all this research coming out, but very little of it was actually making it to the public, in a way that was going to help them. And so I kind of stepped into initially the fertility space. And I was helping couples understand their own bodies to kind of support natural fertility. And then at that point, I realized, I actually think there's a lot of issues in the sexual space here even. So then I went back to uni and did my master's in sexual and reproductive health, and I majored in psychosexual therapy. And then from there, moved back into private practice and I've been there ever since. And I've just loved it. I mean, it's really challenging.
So cool.
But in all the right ways. And I think, like I said, God has just sort of open this door and open this door, and I've just been like, okay, let's just go there. Let's just go there. But having said that, my whole life I've loved talking about sex. All my friends would attest to, my high school friends would attest to my crazy obsession with random sex facts that I would throw at them through my teens. So I've always been super comfortable, in this space.
So it was never a shock to anyone
No.
to end up where you did. The writings were on the wall. Maybe you just didn't see, but everyone else did.
And I had to wait till I was actually kind of semi-experienced to justify stepping into that space as well, I felt. So I got married and I had a few kids, and I felt like, okay, maybe I can, have a say in this space.
Yeah. I have a thought. I think I know what I'm talking about now, a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, today I have you on because this is part of a series exploring sex and listening to a whole lot of specialists and experienced, wonderful women that love the Lord. And so I wanted to talk to you today, Monica, about, I guess, this kind of, I always get confused when people say middle age. Like, what is middle age? I feel like that could be, as long as you, or short as you want it to be. But I want to more hone in on the women that are finding themselves in their like mid to late 30s and then, kind of in their 40s and 50s, this kind of weird period where you're not sure, some of us may be newly married, but you're not in that young kind of life is starting out phase, and you're not in the retired phase yet. You're in this funny stage. And I find within myself, and I'm sure for many listeners, that in this stage that we find ourselves in, we're, for many of us, not all of us, have gone through pregnancy and having children. And so our bodies have changed, and perhaps that season has ended for us. So then there's this process we're going through. Many of us maybe find ourselves a little bit further down the marriage line. And then, you've got your women in your 40s and 50s. You've got your kids, they're not babies anymore. I mean, they'll always be our babies, but, they're growing up. They're getting bigger. Some of us may not have kids, may not experience that, but are still going through all the menopausal changes and the hormonal changes that are happening. So this is a big group of people to speak about.
Yes.
And I know off air, Monica, we were saying, where do we start? But I would love for you to maybe just walk us through what similarities are there for us women in our like late 30s, 40s, 50s, and can you kind of in a way summarize like what we could kind of expect at each little stage as we go through life, and then we can maybe pull through a whole lot of questions how that impacts us sexually in our marriages and individually.
Yeah, sure. And as you say, it's a really big stage. And I think these days people are really honestly at such different parts of their life, even in their 30s. Some people might be newly married, having children in their mid 30s. But let's just assume that we're kind of talking about that group of women that you were talking about that maybe have had their children already and are sort of in the throes of either having kids that are at school, right up, or even just post kids. I think that is a space as well. And I think what I was talking to you about before is there are these really distinctive moments or seasons for women that often take so much adjustment. And I think that it's really similar, that transition into motherhood and the transition from being a mother into like the menopausal stage are almost two distinct kind of transition points for women's bodies. But the way in which we step into those spaces are very similar in the sense that it's often takes a lot of awareness of the changes, and a lot of the changes are very hormonally driven as well, which has their own unique impacts on the way that we see ourselves, the way our relationships unfold, the way we kind of identify the identity that we hold in ourselves, and also very real physiological effects on the body as well, which all impact on, given that I'm a sexologist, I'm very acutely aware of how it all impacts on sexual connection and kind of sexuality, I guess, is a broad term. And so, when you've just had a baby, for instance, you might have really high levels of prolactin. If you're breastfeeding, you'll have very low levels of estrogen. It's more progesterone oriented. And likewise in menopause, as you're trending towards that. And mind you, this is really interesting. I only kind of came across this the other week as I was reading that menopause can really start 10 years, or perimenopause can actually start 10 years before menopause. So if you're actually 40 and let's say your menopause is somewhere in the 50s, things are already starting to change even while your cycles are still regular and you're not seeing anything per se. So there's still all these changes happening.
Women just we really get it.
Yeah,
We get all the
that's
things.
right, exactly. And so, already even in me, as I'm, trending in this direction, there might be what tends to happen is your progesterone levels are starting to decrease. Your estrogen levels are kind of fluctuating. This is the crazy thing. It kind of goes up and down, which is, the result of hot flashes and all sorts of unusual symptoms that you'll have mood swings and sore breasts and things like that. And then you'll have the eventually you'll teeter out and you'll have low estrogen levels from there on in, when you kind of finally hit that the end point and you hit menopause. And that impacts in so many different ways. It impacts your sleep, your energy levels, weight gain, even like aspects of your brain, like brain fog, and skin and vascular, how well sort of your blood vessels and sort of how well vascularized you are, and urinary symptoms. So all of those things, that's just general, is changing in your body. And then you've got the more sexually, I don't know if you want to go there, but the more sexual symptoms, like your do you want to go there? Do you want to
go there? No, go there. That's the whole point of this series. I'm trying to normalize the fact that it all changes down there.
This is the thing, as I don't want to scare people because I feel like, this is just life. And I think that there can also be a lot of joy in the transition as well, and adjustment. And it forces people into checking in with themselves, not getting complacent about who they are. It forces couples to check in with each other. The constant changing can really grow intimacy with self and others. And so I don't want to be saying this to scare anyone listening going, oh my goodness, why am I a woman? And why is this going to happen to me? But more to just help people be prepared for those changes so that when they do happen, it's not like there is this sort of fear that something's going wrong. Because I think without that awareness, it can really catch people off guard, or, all these changes, particularly in areas that we don't talk about already anyway, like the vulva. So the lowering estrogen actually has pretty big impacts on the lubrication of the vagina. Even the vaginal walls will start to thin. It's got less elasticity to it, and so it ends up being more kind of almost like crepe papery. So it means that then you have, with intercourse, greater chance of pain, micro tears, itching, irritation, burning feelings. So intercourse can sometimes suddenly become painful for women as they trend towards menopause and as all these changes happen to the vagina. Even the tissue, the appearance of the vulva changes, so there's like a loss of fatty tissue. The kind of vagina and vulva atrophies a little, and you can even get sort of narrower. The vagina can get shorter, and even the clitoris can disappear. It can kind of retract. The hood can retract, and the labia can. So there's all these kind of even physical structured things that will change for women as the hormones start to shift. And so, certain positions become tricky. I get some women that also get really quite self-conscious about those changes, even if there's like urinary incontinence as part of that. Suddenly it's like, oh my goodness, the smell, I don't want to go there. I don't want my partner to go there. So even,
absolutely,
aspects like that around the physical is tricky. And then also because the vascular things are, aspect is changing, and even the muscle tone changes, the experience of orgasm and arousal changes as well. So a lot of women will come in and say, what's wrong with me? I'm finding it much more difficult to reach orgasm or to climax or even to feel aroused. And when I do climax, it doesn't really feel intense anymore. It's just like a little blip on my radar. And it's not really worth all the effort,
It's a fleeting moment.
It's a fleeting moment. That's right. And that's because, the part of the orgasm is this kind of great holding of tension and this sort of release. And if you can't hold a lot of that tension because your pelvic floor is weakened, or even after children, I get this as well, the process of childbirth really can weaken pelvic floor, then you won't be able to sort of have that, hold the tension and then have that release. Or you'll have difficulty with the blood reaching the genitals in a way that will really support arousal. But the good news is there's all sorts of things we can do about it. There's sex toys and taking a little bit more time, slowing down, and sometimes people exercise before they have sex so that the blood is kind of really perfusing the body before they have sex. We've got special creams and moisturizers for the vagina, just like you put a cream on your face, make sure you don't get wrinkly. You've got like moisturizing creams for the skin in your vagina. You've even got estrogen-based estrogen creams that you kind of locally put in the vagina, which is amazing for maintaining the elasticity of the vagina while you're going through menopause. So that it doesn't.
So you're going to get a full facelift for your vagina.
Oh, totally. Exactly. So, not to fear anyone. We've got lots of ways to work.
You just go in and get a facial and get it all sorted.
Exactly. So,
That's amazing, isn't it? It's actually, I do remember, so I've interviewed reverse to how this is going to be released, but I've already done my interview with Patricia on retirement age, and she does make a comment in there that not only does our boobies go gravity, everything goes gravity, especially for men as well. And I went, oh, I didn't know that. That's a new one for me.
That's right. All that toning kind of can change. But also there's a freedom in that too, because I think for women particularly, there's so much caught up in how you look and whether you're beautiful enough and hot enough for sex. And when you kind of put all of that away and you're just bringing yourself to your partner, in a raw form, and that everything's gone to gravity both ways, there's a freedom that, some of my clients say is just so liberating.
That's cool.
So yeah, it doesn't have to be all kind of, downhill, I guess. There's a lot of positive things on the other side. So, and actually I want to mention this because I found this quite interesting as well, that there is this shift in the brain as well. So even the reducing hormones of progesterone and estrogen, they think that it's the hormone that also keeps you sort of like very much in a people-pleasing state as a woman. It's like, oh, I'm going to put everyone else's needs first. I'm going to not speak up because I want to be kind in this context and nurturing. And as that starts to decrease, it's really interesting. The women will start to feel a little more empowered to say what they want and to hold a boundary and to say, no, actually, I would like to do that. And that's a really interesting phenomenon as well that often catches a lot of couples off guard, because they'll come in and suddenly the husband saying, my wife is really like standing up for things and saying no, and she won't do this, and she's not going with the flow anymore, and she's starting to prioritize things where she wasn't. And that's such an interesting relational dynamic to work with and really healthy for couples to hit. But a lot of the time when they're coming in this sort of 40-50 bracket, there is this very distinct experience for women where they go, yeah, it's like I'm just coming out of myself, and in kind of finding myself and finding my voice again. And I think that's even moderated by hormones. So there you go. There's so much, isn't there?
There is so much. I love as well how science just constantly kind of proves what God's outlined. Like I think of that and I just think of also that kind of explains a lot of wisdom, to know when to put boundaries up and to have learned from all the experiences and to like kind of not care anymore about what other people think. You like to think that's a sign of maturing and wisdom. And there we go. Science is backing up and going, no, it's actually a thing going on in your head. And there is something about age. That's wonderful.
Yes.
That's cool.
As you talk, it reminds me of there's a book, I think it's called The Slow Moon Rises or something. It's just coming to mind. Let me just see if I've got it somewhere. It's called The Slow Moon Climbs, The Science, History and Meaning of Menopause. I'm not sure if you've heard of that one.
No, I've not.
But there's a lot of clients that read that tell me about this grandmother hypothesis, which is sort of talks about how important it is for women, the importance of women in their older age sort of surviving for the purpose of small communities. That there is a really important purpose for women in their older age being like what we've been discussing, kind of empowered and strong to actually hold a protective space for other women coming up the ranks.
Yes.
And also providing support for women so that they can have lots of children sort of one after the other, because there's a kind of community support and protection from that generation of older, wiser elders, I guess, which we're losing. I mean, which I don't think we have so much of in this context, but
no,
it does.
Can I?
Yeah.
Does it sounds like to me, ladies, that menopause is creating Titus 2 women,
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Let's run with that.
Let's run with that.
That's a highlight to menopause, because I think we all look at menopause and we go, oh my gosh. And when I was prepping for this series, I actually put it out on Instagram and I asked a few women, like, what would be questions you want to ask? And a lot of the questions I got were menopause, like, what do I expect? And then a lot of the women in menopause going, this sucks. No one told me what would happen. But I did have one or two women reach out and be like, it sucks. But once I knew what was happening and I knew that there was help, it hasn't been that bad. Like, I've been able to process and walk through it. And my partner's been great because he's been educated and informed. So, I guess I'm just trying to put it out there as well that it's not all bad, and that it sounds like there's a lot of science to back up what's going on, which means there's probably a lot of answers to help us get through it. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
For sure. And I feel like we're learning more and more about the science behind it and what to expect. There's this wonderful book I'd actually highly recommend it. It's called The Hormone Repair Manual by Lara Briden. I mean, I don't know.
I'll link it in the episode notes.
I'm not promoting it at all because I know her, but it's one of the books that I go to, even with clients as they're talking to me about symptoms and things. It's just got such a beautiful sort of layout of all the different possible things that can happen and questions you can ask your doctors. And so you're right. We just know so much about this space, or we're getting to know so much about this space. So it's not this sort of thing that descends upon us and then we're stuck.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I want to touch on, because I really want to work through sexual intimacy for women, kind of and then like kind of work our way through, I guess, maybe. But I'm in my head, I keep on coming back to sexual intimacy seems to be closely connected to confidence.
Okay.
And this self-confidence, or this ability to communicate what it is we're feeling, which I think, again, comes to that confidence of being able to, that safety to be able to do that. So I just wanted to ask your experience or your views on, like, how closely is our sexual satisfaction linked to our confidence? Like, is it a thing? Is it not? What is it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I feel like intimacy, the way I define it is sort of into me see. Like, you see into me and I'm comfortable with that, and I see into you and I'm comfortable to share something of myself with you, because ultimately that's the only bit you get to see is what I choose to share. And I can also hold steady in the face of really seeing you and your heart and in the brokenness and the beauty together, held together. And I think that is, I mean, it's modeled on God's intimacy, right? And the intimacy that we get to share with him. And so that it's less, when I hear the word confidence, it's almost like, it's not so much confidence is more the thing that kind of is a side effect of. I guess it's sort of not something you can force. It almost grows in light of how you're growing. But I would say the capacity to do that is a sort of is a way of forming or creating a solid sense of self, is how I probably define it. So you're not actually looking to the other person for validation of who you are, which so many women do. It's like, my identity and my worth is defined only by how much I achieve what I have or who I please, basically.
Mm.
And so, and that rolls out into the sexual space too, right? How much I achieve is the performance pressure, or who I please. Am I good enough for you? Are you, and that when you're kind of using the sexual space or your partner for validation, then you're kind of outside of you're kind of putting your worth in someone else's hands. And that is sort
Mm.
of a very sort of fraught experience. It's like, and I think that's where people get caught, because then that if you want to be truly intimate with that person and you want to really know their heart, that person knows that they're carrying your heart here. They're not going to really want to tell the truth, because they know that it's all about validating you. It's not actually about two people engaging from truthful spaces. And so you end up with a lot of hiding when you're looking for validation in the sexual space or in another. But the best thing in being Christian is that we are able to find our validation and our identity in Christ, and that is such a freeing thing, that we don't have to impress anyone or be anyone, or, we have belonging, we have acceptance, we are seen, we are known with God. And from that place, and that's that peace, we can actually express ourselves and dare to be seen by another, if we can get
Mm.
that right. And that's
Yes.
really
Yeah.
hard, I want to say, but it's a journey that I see people go on, and if they get it right, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, I think so. And I do wonder, like, speaking into that, I feel like I meet mums and it's almost feels like it's cut down the line. Like women either tend to can you walk us through what this process is of, women tend to either really find themselves in motherhood, because it's a lot. Like there's a lot that's we have to serve wholeheartedly and sacrificially. But I find a lot of women either lose themselves or they really find themselves.
Mm.
Um, and I wonder like what that is that's going on. Like why? Why? Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
Well,
It's not really a sexual question, but I do think it plays into it, doesn't it? Like what we're
yeah,
talking about.
yeah.
So,
I almost think that you need to lose yourself to find yourself again. Like, I
mm,
really think that there is a certain level of laying down a kind of, I feel like my life has been full of deconstruction and reconstruction moments, with
yeah,
each season. And I think women are at different stages of the deconstruction, reconstruction state. So long as you're
yeah,
moving, I'm happy. I think sometimes people get stuck in deconstruction and don't know where to move from there. And I love working with women in that space to progress them back into construction. It's like, okay, if you've lost a sense of your sexual self and you don't know who you are anymore and what you enjoy, and what sex means to you, let's start to reconstruct that. But I think a
yeah,
lot of people get stuck in there. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with the deconstruction of it. I think it's really necessary, and I think a quote comes to mind. Not all those who wonder are lost, And I think
yes,
that a lot of women are wondering just for a little bit, just kind of curiously wandering around different spaces. And um, yeah, and I think particularly after, say, you've been a mum and your kids are starting to be more independent, there is this moment of being like, who am I again?
who am I?
Um,
Yeah,
now that I'm not
absolutely.
needed by them as much, and to
Yeah,
spend a lot of my life orienting around them and finding my identity and being a mum. Like what else, what other things are important to me, and how else, as an identity, and with my identity as a child of God, how else might this manifest now that this part of
mm,
this season of my life is changing? And that I think is super normal, and not really about loss of confidence or more confidence, but more about a deconstruction, reconstruction time.
mm.
Um, and so it's just about being honest about that and kind of going the journey and asking those questions all over again. Um, yeah, I mean, that's how I understand it, but that's, it,
No, that's really helpful. I think that's really helpful because it all ties in because it's easy to ask questions about our sex lives and how we can, but it's all of us. It's a very holistic approach, and so I think it's good to kind of flesh this out again.
Yeah. And I think, I think part of the challenge is, particularly with sexuality, as we talk about this, is so many women have been socially conditioned to have their sexuality always in reference to a guy's sexuality. Right. So before marriage, it's all about, I've got to dress modestly. I've got to make sure that I'm holding the boundary for them if we're going too far before marriage. And so all of their sexuality is actually in reference to the guy. And then after marriage, it's like, oh, I've got to be a good wife. I've got to make sure that this is a very purity culture kind of idea, but it's actually pervasive through
Yes.
really every client that I have, that I've got to give my husband enough sex to keep him happy. There's a lot of shoulding. When I say shoulding, it's like, I should do this, I should do that, I should be this. And so it's always in reference to somebody else, and pleasing somebody else. And that becomes a sort of form of servicing at its worst. That's when people come to me and say, I'm feeling like it's a chore, or I'm really bored, or it hurts now, and it's not worth pushing through it anymore, I guess what women haven't ever reconstructed for themselves sometimes ever is, what does sexuality mean to me? Where am I on this journey? What does it mean for me to be a sexual being? What do I look forward to in this space? What could I get excited for sexually in engaging with my partner? There's all these questions that they've probably never asked, that has kept them kind of linked to sex in a way that isn't particularly healthy. And menopause is a fantastic time for this reevaluating and finding a sense of your sexual self again. Yeah. Sorry.
So it's good to get there before menopause, but it sounds like menopause may force you into that space if you don't get there beforehand. So fear not, you will end up there facing these questions.
It definitely pushes some pretty.
Well, I have to ask then, what are some of those questions we should be asking ourselves? Like, if I'm a woman and I'm hearing all this, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know where to start. Like, what would be some of the things that you would suggest a woman to be thinking that through, regardless of where she's at, I guess, in life? Doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, some of the questions I asked before, the kind of ultimate meaning, when I ask a lot of women what that means to them, they say, oh, well, sex just means making my husband happy. And I challenge them to sort of be like, well, what could it mean for you? I ask them whether they are connected to desire and pleasure. A lot of them aren't, especially Christians. They feel so guilty, like pleasure is somehow indulgent.
I struggle with that. Yeah. No, the same. It's like, I can't do something for myself because I need to be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're really disconnected from even being okay to go there. That's the challenge. And then even to desire, there's actually a really beautiful quote. I cut this out because I wanted to share it with you. I think it's really beautiful. It's by a Mormon sexologist that I follow, and I quite like her. Her name's Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. And can I read it out? Because I think it's...
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
She says, desire is an expression of your core self, your honest self. It is linked to authenticity, self-development, and freedom. To develop an honest or solid sense of self, women must claim, uncover, and develop what it is we desire. It is a deep form of self-expression. It expresses and exposes who we are and what we hope to become and what we're about. We must see the virtue of desire as the power source of our development into strong, able, loving women. Knowing who you are and what you want, and then taking the risk of creating and developing those gifts in your life. And so I think, really, I don't know, I just love that quote, because I think it's like, what do you desire? Really getting in touch with a sense of desire, a sense of agency and ability, freedom to do that and go after that. Getting to know your body is part of that as well. So many women are disconnected from their bodies. Sometimes because of menopause, it's like, I don't want to drop into it because when I do, it's uncomfortable. And I don't want to go near that part of my body because it's changing and I find it really gross, so actually allowing yourself to be friends, start to become friends with your body again and familiarize yourself with it all over again. whether it's you've just had a child or whether you're heading into menopause, the things that feel good on your body will change over time. Even I have women that don't enjoy nipple play before kids, and suddenly when they get pregnant, they have a child, nipple play feels amazing. Um, so it's like, suddenly it's connected in. It's like so there's just so much there that constantly kind of checking in with yourself. And I guess still seeing yourself as a sexual being. I think there's a lot of myths out there that say that if you're old and still having sex, it's some kind of disgusting or it's wrong, and I'm not sure if Patricia would have talked about that, but there's this sort of sense that those two don't go together. But actually kind of continuing to see yourself as a sexual being it doesn't have to be a sexy, it's not like you kind of fitting this stereotypical sexy, but sexual in the sense that you're longing for deep physical intimacy to express and receive that from another human being is really beautiful. So yeah, taking it slow, really good communication, are things that I kind of work with. Being present, such a big thing in this day and age where our brains are so going 100 miles an hour. How do you actually start to be present in a moment for someone, just to give them your full attention? And sex is such a great place to be practicing that,
It's a lost art. That is, it really is.
Totally. So just these kind of things, I mean, in terms of preparing ways in which you can start to step into this sense of, self, there's all the things that you could, start to be doing.
Yeah. This is great. I feel like I'm doing a therapy session with you. Are these, which you do. I don't know if you're looking for new clients, but I can say to listeners, you do have the practice. So, so I have to ask, and this was a question from one of our listeners. So we've kind of gone through that like self and understanding and growing in understanding what we need and being okay with that, being comfortable with that. There's a practical aspect which listeners asked, and I thought, oh, yeah, this is a good question to ask, is I have teenagers. They're in the house all the time, coming and going. It's just, she's like, my husband and I, sex life is just gone because it's like they're knocking on our door or they're just rocking up at home. Like, what's the how do parents practically figure out what advice do you give?
Yeah.
We've got young kids and, it's like you've got short windows, and I'm aware that as they're getting older, those windows will get smaller. What do we do as parents?
Yeah.
How do we maintain a sex life?
I think it's a great question. And it's so important because I always say to people, the first step is prioritizing it in the first place.
Yeah.
Actually, I say to people, is it a marble in your jar? Because people will come in with full marble jars, like jars with full marbles, and they'll be trying to add sex to it, but they're already at full capacity. So it's like, what are you willing to take out to put this marble in if you really want it to be a marble? What are you willing to sacrifice, shift around to actually make the time or the effort or the intentionality to be intimate in this way that you don't get to be with anyone else in the whole world? And so that the first step is actually just both of you agreeing that maybe you might have to take a marble out of the jar to make space for this, and then that opens up a lot of potential. The other thing I think with the question around the teenage kid is, I mean, why are we keeping this a secret from them anyway? I mean, I actually say to them, tell them, look, mum and dad are having, a cuddle time, or they're having time together. You can choose to be in the house if you want while we're here, or you can choose to be out with your friends or outside and playing, or, and then
but upstairs is a no-go zone.
Will make the boundary for you because they won't want to have, so it's actually really healthy for teenagers and your children to know mum and dad have time together that is physical connected time. They don't need to know exactly what you're doing, but they need to know. It's actually a really beautiful expression of healthy sexual relationship for them to be aware, what, my parents regularly, and it's funny, for little kids, they won't clue in what cuddle time is until they're 16, and then they'll be like, oh, gross. Now I know what cuddle time was for my parents, you know. But regardless, that question of were my parents intimate? Yes, they were. And it was regular and it was connected and they prioritized it. It's a modeling to them, you know, in future sort of down the line of what a healthy sexual relationship looks like and what it looks like to prioritize it.
That's so good. That is so, I would have never thought of that. And
Yeah.
that is so helpful. Yes.
And so I'm very much a believer of like be open with your children about the time that
Yeah.
you're putting in. Set it up so that, you know, yep, they might have the TV on or whatever, but you're still telling them this, like we're locking the door, and locks on the doors are really good as well. Locking the door, mum and dad are having cuddle time, don't want to be disturbed, you know, really putting some really healthy boundaries in place around that, but also not keeping it from them either. Like you sort of sneaking around or secretly. And like I said, teenagers are great because they'll be like, I don't want to be in the room.
Peace out. I'm going to the movies. I'm doing something. I'm not here.
Especially those teenagers, like, or those 24-year-olds are still living at home, you know. It might be
That'll get them out quickly.
Exactly. Great way to move them out of the home.
Your dad and I have spoken. We're going to increase cuddle time. We're going every second night. Up to you whether you still want to live here.
That's right. And then I think the other thing is, you know, people live very, very busy lives. So I was working with 2 doctors and they were literally like shift workers. It was very,
yeah.
And they, you know, once again got together. They were like, we're going to prioritize this. And they decided like one person would have an extended lunch break and the guy would come home. So he actually asked his boss whether it'd be okay for him to have extended lunch break on every second Friday. And every second Friday was their like kind of intimacy time. And it wasn't like they had sex every second Friday, but they might have cuddled naked under a blanket and watched something, or they might have talked about what they enjoy sexually, but it was a time for them to prioritize sexual intimacy together, and they looked forward to it and they made that time. So, you know, just being creative about what that looks like, whether it's a date, you know, once a month out to a hotel, or whether it's, you know, coordinating sleepovers with other parents. So you're saying, you know, you take my kids for one Friday night and we'll take your kids for the next Friday night or 2 weeks from now. You know, so there's lots of different ways that you can create that space if you want to. But the first step is that will to make it something.
And I guess like maybe I sometimes when I hear this, I'm like, I always think sex has to be spontaneous or like kind of can't be structured because then it's not real. You know, there's this perception in your head like it has to be. And I think thanks to Hollywood, right?
Yes.
Like Hollywood's ruined a lot of things.
Yes.
So can you speak into that?
Yeah.
Is it okay to schedule it?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I mean, so many people think that because once again, they want the validation of feeling kind of like chosen unexpectedly.
Yeah,
you know,
it's true.
Sort of, it comes back to that. Are we doing this under the guise of should, or are we doing this because we choose to? And I think you can answer that question of choosing still with a scheduled thing. Like we're actually choosing each other in this space and we're choosing to do something fun, and what you choose to do in that space could still be spontaneous. Like it could be each person's turn to choose something unexpected to engage in for that experience. So just because you've set aside time doesn't mean what you do is scheduled either. You know, there's a lot of creativity that you can apply in that space. So I think the other really important thing is we only see in Hollywood what we call spontaneous desire, which is I wake up, I'm feeling horny, I grab you and we have great sex. But actually a very large percentage of people and very large percentage of women in long-term relationships will experience what we call responsive desire, which is I'm starting sex from a place of not feeling anything at all. Like there's no fire burning at all. And you're asking me, do you want to have sex? And I'm thinking, not really, because I have nothing happening. But the thing with responsive desire is you engage because you love the partner. You know, arousal might happen, and then desire kicks in quite a bit later on in the cycle.
Right.
That's the point where a woman will go, wow, this actually feels pretty good. I can't believe
I
I'm
really am enjoying
having
this.
months. Yeah, I'm actually really
Yeah.
enjoying this. And if it is a positive experience, it sort of feeds back into the intimacy of the experience, and she's more willing to go on that journey again. But that is a very different kind of understanding of desire, and really important for people to get, because otherwise they can think, well, I'm broken. I'm not like
Mm,
my husband who wakes up and really wants it, or he might think, oh, she rejects me because she never initiates. It's always me that's initiating. So there's all sorts of misunderstandings that can form around this idea that sex can only be spontaneous and, um, you know, kind of on the spot, as opposed to let's get into it and see whether the desire kicks in, you know, halfway through. So you get it at the gym. Think about going to the gym. I never want to
it's
go,
true.
but once I
Yeah.
get there and I'm in the midst of it, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. I'm so glad I came.
You never really regret it, right? Like you kind of, yeah, yes, yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good.
Yeah.
So helpful, Monique. I've been, I keep saying Monique, Monica, sorry.
No worries. Yeah.
So, okay, we've touched on all that. So moving back, we have touched on and off with menopause, but I do want to put a little bit more time on there because I know a lot of my listeners are at that stage in life.
Sure.
And I love you dearly, all of you, and I feel for you. I had one question, which was, is it genetic? Because, like, can we look to the women in our family to get an understanding of what it may be like for us or not?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is very genetic. Even when you hit menopause, is also very. It's important to find out how that journey was for your mother and even grandmother in terms of that. So I
Yeah,
do
okay.
believe there is some level of genetic component around that. They also say that it's almost like a second puberty as well. So how you went in puberty, in that adjustment, that kind of hormonal adjustment might be also what to prepare for and expect in menopause as well. So if you had a pretty
Okay.
rough puberty and you might have had a bout of depression and found it quite sort of mood swings and painful breasts, and if you had a lot of those symptoms in puberty, then the second puberty, the menopausal part, might also throw a few of those things at you again as well. So that's another aspect I think that I've heard people discussing in terms of how do we know what to expect? Will it hit us hard?
Yep.
When will it hit us? That kind of thing. Yeah.
It's the last puberty, right?
It's,
We don't need to go through it again, right?
let's just call it the last one for now.
Just clarifying. Brace yourself.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So, yeah, but I think and also there are ways that you can make that more gentle.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women kind of opt in for HRT, some sort of hormone replacement therapy. They kind of, even there are a lot of naturopath sort of guided information around taking certain supplements that will kind of soften the blow of the kind of, because a lot of the symptoms are the sudden changes in hormones. And so if we can soften the blow of that a little, then it means people move through it a little better.
Do you know much about the natural, like holistic approach to it? I think because one of the listeners reached out and she was like, I really struggled with it, but then I got control of my diet. I started exercising every single day.
Yeah.
And she's like, the difference was, she's like, my husband even said, like, I've got my wife back.
Totally.
So I'm just curious, like, is there science? Like
Yeah.
what's going on there? What can we do naturally within our own control, I guess, to help us?
No, I've heard that so much from a lot of my clients as well, is once they kind of decided that they were going to embrace it and they were going to kind of really work with it rather than against it,
Yeah.
then there was huge changes. Like once they adapted diet, they reduced alcohol and even caffeine and got onto magnesium supplements and all sorts of, I'm just sort of recalling all the different things that women have told me. Then they've really found at least even something as simple as getting their sleep under control, because a lot of women will wake up in the middle of the night and be like, why am I awake? And once again, it's a it's a kind of hormonal implication. And so even just getting in control of sleep makes a huge difference to the quality of life, the amount of energy someone has.
Massively.
Exercise is epic. It's really important. So all those things that you're mentioning, I think, and even the hormone repair manual has some really good suggestions for ways to do this well. It talks about everything like intermittent fasting and all the different things you could potentially do.
Okay.
How to not get confused between perimenopause, thyroid function, insulin resistance, which all look very similar. When you kind of group the symptoms. So yeah, it can be a bit of a confusing time for people, but like I said, there are a few things out there that I think help people navigate that space.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so what would be your tip then, as we kind of like sort of wrap this up? What would you say is your tips for marriages that are looking down the barrel of this kind of season of life?
Mm.
What is it? What's your like advice to women, to wives, to help the husbands support them well? Because I think there's a lot of frustration out there in married couples
Mhm.
because the woman's like, he just doesn't get me and he doesn't understand what I'm going through. And men, I don't know if they go through a second puberty, but they seem to change a lot in their 50s.
Yeah.
That's just my observation. I have zero backing for that, but they
Well,
they can either get really nice or they get really weird.
they're going through their own changes. I mean, testosterone is
Yeah.
decreasing for them as well. It doesn't have quite the same impact on their bodies as our hormonal shifts, but they're doing their own thing and soul searching. It's really interesting. One of the common presentations I get in my sessions is one partner will be desperately wanting to make the most of what is left of their life. And so they'll want to do all the crazy sex stuff, and they'll want to they've basically got FOMO, like fear of missing out, because I've got just this much time left in my life. And then you'll have the other partner going, I've worked hard. I now deserve to sip on a cocktail by the pool and do nothing else about anything else. I've done so much now that I don't want to hit
I'm out.
the ceiling and try lots of different things, and that's a really interesting that's a really interesting phenomenon that I've noticed in terms of how people approach aging. So when you're talking about men going really weird, I think it's just as people actually face their mortality and what it means to live a good life, and looking back at where they've been and how do they want to spend this last season, things can get quite real for people. And that's when therapy is amazing, because you've got two people with very different ideas of what that looks like, trying to build a bridge together to stay connected. And that's not always immediately obvious and sometimes people lack the skill to even be able to disagree well,
Yeah.
and so you get a lot of conflict, and then even less willingness to have sex, and then lots of rash decisions, and then you get betrayals and all sorts of, it kind of opens up a whole lot of things for people around that menopausal stage or perimenopausal stage. And then the women are there going, I'm not going to stand for this. And the guys are like, well, my whole life I've been used to you just going along, and now what are you doing? And you get this whole sort of dynamic. And I'm being very classic here. I mean, there's a lot of flipped, context
Yeah,
where
totally.
the genders are flipped. So I want to make that clear as well. I'm just picking up a trope, but
a more typical theme that you see.
Yeah, that's right. But that I see it both genders across, and it doesn't even matter around the gender. I see it even in gay couples too. So I just but I think so I think coming back to your question, you're asking about sort of final tips, is it, for people?
Yeah, because I also think, like, as you were saying all that, I was like thinking of a few family friends we have where they're in their 50s or late 40s, 50s. And they're just, a wife actually said to me the other day, she goes, was it passing ships?
Ships in the night.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you just, you've got your life, I've got mine. The kids have all moved out. I don't know each other anymore. Haven't had sex in ages, so it's that plus added all the hormonal stuff. So I guess how do they navigate that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the disinvestment option is so easy, right? Because it's almost like you feel like you've raised your kids, you've gone on that mission, and to fight for more engagement, it can just feel a bit hard and like you don't have the energy for it.
Yeah.
And I guess the people are free to do that. I just think that they're missing out on such a beautiful opportunity for deep intimacy at an age where they actually have the time to invest in it. Um, I actually think that I want to read this out too, because this is something I'm passionate about. Is I think people miss what is actually really important around what sex, the kind of spiritual meaning of sex as well. I think
Yeah.
people just
Yeah.
think sex is just this, we're kind of old now and sex is just for reproduction and we've had our children and therefore now that we've done that and even my body's telling me no sex, then therefore this is time to tap out, right? Tap out of physical intimacy and therefore tap out
Like
of
I'm
emotional
done.
intimacy and therefore just, and also that idea of living my life finally, having freedom to do life as I want to do. That whole thing comes together and leads people apart, couples apart in that stage. But I actually think that that sex actually represents the very nature of covenant love and the intimacy that we share with God through Christ. So it's actually a really spiritually profound journey to go on, where there's this deep longing to be together, to be united in intimacy, where each is known, truly seen, and accepted by the other, where there is pleasure and celebration, love that is fruitful and creating, a working together to serve and glorify other, and all built on a foundation of faithfulness, of never leaving or forsaking the other. A private, sacred, and safe oasis of deep connection. If that's what's possible, in that image, in that, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to create at least something of that to get a taste of that in that later season of life? Who wouldn't want to fight for that? And I get that it's so much more complicated than, sort of just working towards it. I know that there are so many layers of hurt and unspoken things that haven't been spoken and challenges and children and I get that. I see it, right? I work with the complexities, but I think at the core of it there is this on offer if we choose to go after it. And
Yeah.
I just think it points us also to what we have in Christ, and that's a beautiful thing as well. Mm.
Yeah. Amen to that. That's so true. We lose sight of that. And it's funny as well because I'm like, I just think of life as 100 years. I know it's not, but like 50 is only halfway.
Yeah,
Like don't give up. You've only run part of the race. It's
totally.
still more ahead. So
Totally. And
that's beautiful though.
actually, you know, um, something of the partner that knows you so well will also kind of help expose in you where the growth is as well. So if we dare to allow the relationship to refine us, it will. And who better to call out your growth areas than someone who's known you for the last 40 years?
Yeah.
Um, and
You could
so
build that trust back up.
yeah, so if you are with someone that is on the whole pretty good and not abusive and cares for you and is for your best, then leaning into what they're saying could actually take you on a beautiful journey of self-discovery if you allow it to. But I think that that's pretty confronting. I mean, my marriage alone, I've been very refined, and it's a tough, it's a tough and rewarding path, but you know, you got to have the fortitude to face it, and not
Yeah.
everyone wants to or chooses to, but I'm a
Yeah.
fighter, so I
Yeah.
still
And
do it.
I think as Christians we need to be fighters, like Jesus is faithful and he pushes through. So I think that's a good model for us when it's safe to do the exact same.
Totally.
When it gets hard, we commit and we stay faithful. And
Yeah. And you're not alone. We are not alone.
yeah.
We have the creator of this world on our side that we can pray to, we can ask for, forgiveness from. That is for our relationships, that is for love, that is for sex, that created it. And so we sometimes forget to involve him at that level, but we can. and we should.
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
pray.
I,
Yeah.
I've noticed it. This is the thing as well. People don't like, please don't be discouraged because when you pray those prayers, God is faithful. Like he answers every prayer. It may not be how you want it, but like
Mm.
definitely I've seen in my life when I'm struggling and I'm like, oh God, I need help just to reconnect with Will or to whatever it is about our marriage. Every single time I have seen an answer in some way, shape, or form, and pretty quickly. And it's because God loves marriage.
Yeah.
And he, because of that covenant that you were talking about, so he wants us to have thriving, beautiful, fruitful marriages, not fruitful just as kids, like fruitful in a whole lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I do. I'm really thankful for that. And I can testify for that personally.
Yes.
That when you're willing to fight, God really pulls you through that.
Yes.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
well, Monica, that was really helpful. I have to say, I can point people to your practice. Are you taking on new clients or you
Yeah.
still?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep,
I'm,
I can.
the way I work is it's just, I'm sort of, people just come in at an ad hoc, and if they want to continue, they can. Sometimes it's just a few sessions that people
Yeah,
need to
okay.
kind of unpack things or need a bit of redirection, and other clients I'm
Yep,
with for a few years. And so it's very kind of, that's what I love about my job, is it's not sort of like stuck in any particular format. So
yep.
yeah, and next year things will be changing a bit. I'll be still in private practice, but then working for Life to the Full, which is a
Yes, can
new,
you explain that a bit more to
yeah,
us?
yeah, that's right. I'm so excited. It's like a kind of holistic Christian mental health organization that will be being brought together next year. I think we're already online, so you can find us there, Life to the Full. And yeah, it's just got psychology care. I'll be head of sex and relationships. There'll be spiritual coaching, and so it's all done through a lens of theology and faith and Christianity. And
So good.
yeah, hopefully we'll get to retreats in time, so Christian retreats, and just sort of really just caring, deeply caring and loving, and praying for the people that we are, servicing or caring for, our clients. So I'm really excited about what that might look like. And yeah, it'll be a place for resources, as well as podcasting happening with it as well. So it'll just be a really, yeah.
So great. That's really awesome. Ah, I love that. Love hearing of more good Aussie resources coming out to the church. It's great.
Yes, so good. Yeah,
It's so good. Well, Monica.
what you're doing as well too. This is great.
Oh, yeah. It's such a privilege and blessing. I love it.
Yeah.
It's such a joy to be able to do this. And all the listeners are just so lovely. They're amazing. I'm forever grateful. I like genuinely love them. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Wonderful.
and the guests, wonderful guests. I love that I get to meet just more and more Aussie women. I really am passionate about that. So, yeah, it's such a privilege. I'm very thankful.
Yeah.
Monica, thank you so much for your time. I have really appreciated it. I will link the resources that you've mentioned in this episode in the episode notes. So if anyone wants to be able to find those books, they can find them. I will also link to you Monica's website, her practice, and also, what was it?
Life to the Full.
Life to the Full. I was like living fully, and I was like, that's not right. Living fully sick, that'd be weird. If you've enjoyed this episode, listeners, please subscribe or leave a review. Make sure you hit the bell button if you are on YouTube. And if this is on all your podcast platforms, make sure you follow along. And like I said, leave a review. That really helps Her Theology grow. Otherwise, follow along on Instagram or Facebook. Instagram's where all the magic happens. And other than that, we will see you next week. Thanks.